Good morning, everybody. I'm JJ Kathy. I'm a volunteer coordinator. I just joined this year, so if you haven't met me yet, hopefully you do on the trails in the future. And almost every time that I've met with volunteers, they have either asked me for help using iNaturalist that they already have or asked what it's for. So we decided to go ahead and just give everybody a little run through. So if you don't already have it, then you'll be going to the Google Play Store if you have Android, or if you have iPhones like most of you have, go to the Apple App Store and just search iNaturalist, and it's a pretty common app, so it comes right up. And you create a username and password like any other account, and verify that account with the verification email that you get. I think we're going into it assuming that some of us might already have that situation down, but if you don't, then we'll be sending some follow-ups after this webinar to make sure that you're able to do that. So before we get into how to use it, we want to go over what it is and what it's used for. It's used on smartphone and tablets, so any device that has a camera, and it uses an image sort of recognition type software to compare a photo that you take to other image data about plants, animals, or whatever organisms in your region. And then that data, once they give you a guess, if you take a picture of a dandelion and it says, okay, yeah, this is sort of looking like a dandelion, then other users are able to browse through all of the iNaturalist data in their area and confirm, yep, I know that one. That one's definitely a dandelion. And once it gets confirmed by enough users, then you can make a safe bet that you have a correct identification for whatever species you were looking at. So the reason that process is important for us at CLC is because we can sort of alter the ways that we manage our properties or the projects that we undertake based on knowing what species are living there. And other conservation organizations do this as well. If somebody iNaturalists a rare plant, that's really good data, to know that we shouldn't be weed whacking in that area or something like that. For me specifically, I really wanted to make sure that all of our volunteer base was familiar with iNaturalist for a lot of things like that in the future, but also because I'm planning on putting together a native seed collection program. So sort of in light of the pandemic, I wanted to have ways for volunteers to participate, just going out on solo missions on the properties. And hopefully in the next year or two, we'll have a pretty streamlined system together where people can go out, identify a species, harvest the seed for that species, and bring it back to us so we can use those plants in restoration projects in the future. But before we start that, we need to know what's out there. So I've made a list of species that we might be looking at, but we're just trying to sort of gauge what we have on our properties. So it'd be really helpful to us for that project and things parallel to that sort of activity.
And Heidi and Jen, I know you both have slightly different approaches to how you might use iNaturalist with CLC. Do you want to talk about that a little?
So, I think in the grand scheme of things, my goal for the education program is still to help the conservation area team build the database for management purposes. But from an education standpoint, we've worked with the Hudson High School at our Greenport conservation area and used it for a sort of short bio blitz along one portion of the trail, and that was the high school kids had their phones, and we went along and just tried to document everything we could within a 1 hour period. And I think for that purpose, it's really helpful just to, from a perspective of like how many different species are in a really small area. And so And then sort of on a personal level, as a biologist, I think it's great as a tool to sort of remind you how to like what different species are, because obviously over time you tend to forget different things. So it's a really helpful tool in that sense. Jen, I don't know if you have anything to add.
Yeah, I agree. I think especially for people who are beginners or not so confident in their identification skills, it's also a good tool to have to help you learn things and how to better identify new species that you might come across.
And it's a heck of a lot easier than toting around several different guidebooks with you in the woods. I know Heidi and I have both done that, even in the recent times, but iNaturalist is pretty great in that. I also just want to talk about it more broadly, and kind of echo some of the early things that JJ mentioned. iNaturalist is interesting. It's a citizen science tool that not only allows you to learn more about what's out there, and for us on kind of the project curation end to collect those observations from a wide variety of participants, but it's an engagement tool, and it's a great way about learning about the natural world. I find that I use it a lot, both in work on the conservation areas here in Columbia County, but a lot of my observations are when I'm traveling to new places and just trying to learn more about the ecology and the plant and species diversity that I encounter while I'm out there. So here, there's a variety of different projects that are shown on this screen right now. A lot of them in New York that have been mentioned. I think another one that's pretty neat that I encountered out there in the wild, so to say, is out at the Presidio Park in San Francisco. They have an issue with coyotes, and they ask the public to put observations of coyotes, whether they can take a picture or not, in there, and that helps them track where there might be problem areas or where the coyote population tends to be congregating or crossing roadways as part of, a predator management program. Let's see, what do we have next? Yes, another prompt for myself. One moment while I jump over here. All right, so not only is iNaturalist that app that you have on your phone to help you collect data, but it's really this it's a two-piece system. And so the website is a great avenue to collect information. You can upload things here if you have just been out there taking photos with, say, a digital SLR or other camera. It's a great way to check in and make those observations and confirm what people see. So here, this is an observation by someone that I follow. There is a social media aspect to it. This user thinks that this might be porcupine, and in my experience and what I've seen, I agree with him. It's simple enough. iNaturalist makes things available. So you saw that it popped over to research grade up here. iNaturalist basically has an algorithm that says, if there's so many agreements about what an observation is, it becomes a research grade resource, and that resource can be used by biologists and researchers around the world as a data set. I strongly encourage you all, if you have the time and inclination, to really peruse around the iNaturalist website, because there are these areas that you can learn more about. You can look at the published research that cites iNaturalist data collection in here. You can even narrow it down to find out more about what's happening right even, in the United States or of another country that you might have an interest or a passion about. There's forums where you can really, forgive my parlance here, but nerd out about what people are seeing and participate in those discussions. There are guides available through the More tab. The More tab is a great area to dive in. But someone put together a guide of all of the prohibited and regulated plants in the state of New York. These are the plants that we tend to refer to as invasives, and these are the ones that JJ spends a lot of time fretting about as she's out there working with people. If anyone was able to join JJ last month in October to get out at High Falls and start to think and help us with the mapping of the invasives out there, this is a resource that will really bolster that and help you out. And lastly, I just wanted to show you one area that I worked with a colleague on in a previous iteration of my professional life. And this is more of that, rigorous methodology in here, but all of these red points are observations that were made. So this person was making observations on transects and using that, and then took these observations and through the use of GIS and some other ecological knowledge, was able to identify which plants were wetland species or wetland edge species, and then we turned this kind of grid into a probable wetlands map for that property. So there's definitely a lot of neat ways. Your observations that you make and add to the Columbia Land Conservancy project will be useful in the long run as we are able to pull that out and process it in GIS. So I'm going to jump back over to the PowerPoint, and we're going to get into it. And just a few last tips and bits of wisdom that I want to share with you before we get started, and just for you to keep in mind as you're going, is it's a lot easier if you make sure that you have the location, the GPS sharing enabled for that app on your phone. I'm only going to be able to speak to you in terms of the iOS system. That's what I use. But generally, when you get a new app, it will give you a prompt as to whether you want to allow that app to use your location data, as well as to have access to your camera and photos. The algorithm, the kind of machine learning system that JJ mentioned, when you import a photo that helps it kind of give you probable observations, is going to be able to do that with more accuracy if it already has your location data there. And we can kind of discuss that further, and we can delve into some of that at the end if you have questions about it. Another good practice is, as some of you may have noticed, we don't have great cell coverage throughout the county. iNaturalist gives you the ability to save your observations and then upload them at a later point. I strongly recommend this, that you want to just observe, and then upload them all when you get back to Wi-Fi. You can even kind of do that species identification when you're back the confines. Gesundheit. And then, as I said, the platform is kind of two parts. There's the app observation side, and then there's the website, and where you can kind of curate, manage, explore, create, and share with others. JJ, all you.
Yeah, so I'm glad that we got a chance to go through that information on what the iNaturalist data is used for, because maybe it's like the invasive species cynicism getting to me or something, but for a long time I knew about iNaturalist and I didn't see a point in using it because I thought it was just going to end there. And since I felt that way, I've looked into it a lot more, and it gets used very heavily for organizations that are doing really good work on a large scale, because we have more eyes than their staff. So there's definitely a lot of importance to doing it. So if it seems frustrating to get your cold hands out on your phone when you're on the trail, just remember that you're saving somebody's doctoral thesis or something. So yeah, so I have an Android personally. I don't know how many people are going to be using Android for this. Super simple to add an observation either in the field or just take a picture and upload it later, like Doug was mentioning. So you start with that little green plus sign in the right when you open the app. That's the screen that you should see. If you have observations already, they'll show up in that list format, as you can see. So yeah, you start with that green button, and then you either take a photo by pressing that center button or choose an image from your gallery. So if you took the photo at a different time, then you would just go in there and find it. And like Doug mentioned, it's really important to have your GPS on, because when it pulls up these like these suggested butterfly species that it might be for this photo that we have here, it's a little easier to narrow down. Okay, you're in New York State taking this data. It's not going to show you, some type of South American butterfly that would in no way be an option in Columbia County. So yeah, so after you have that button pressed, it'll bring you to the next screen, and you can go over those image options. There's also the option to not have a photo, like how Doug was mentioning. If somebody requested, hey, if you saw a coyote, just tell us. That's an option. And I think there's also sound options on some of the newer versions, maybe for bird calls or things like that. But for our purposes as CLC, we're going to be using the images. And when it does show you these suggestions, it'll give you the best that it can do, sort of. So that there are some times where if the picture is really not up to par, or if it's not in a life phase, then it'll say, we're not 100% sure, but here are our guesses. This one shows a little more confidence in the sense that it literally says we're pretty sure it's in this genus. So you can be pretty sure that it's that one. And then the ones that show below are sort of up to your discretion to take a shot at it. That little icon with the arrows pointing in both directions, I usually use that because it will set up the photo that you took next to the photo that they have on file for that species. And you can sort of play which one of these is not like the other. And then when you've found one that you have a pretty good guess on, yeah, you just press that check mark on the right there.
Yeah, and it's okay not to know. The first iteration of iNaturalist didn't come with suggestions. You kind of had to do your best guess. So, if you're like, well, this is a flowering plant, then you might just put in that it's a flowering plant and let the iNaturalist community kind of dive in and make suggestions about what species they think it is.
I've put in plenty of observations where I know it's not that, but I know that somebody else will see it and correct me. That's how the community functions. So although your GPS should be on throughout the whole time you're taking the observation, the next step is to just include more specific location data. So if you're doing it when you're no longer in the field, you can zoom back into the spot that you were at. If it's a vague area, like it was, this vegetation was surrounding this area. So for this one, I typed in the conservation area that I was at, and it comes right up, and it then appears in that list format.
And all of our conservation areas should be in iNaturalist as places that are searchable and geo-referenced.
Which is very
so if you're not sure, that's okay. And it does allow for some flexibility in the accuracy of your location. You can see by the circle here that maybe JJ made that observation on the downhill side of the sledding hill at Siegel Kleinkill. But it right here it's saying, well, it's in the approximate area of Siegel Kleinkill. It's nearby. And for our purposes, that is just as useful.
Mm-hmm. Because plants spread and butterflies, as it turns out, fly. Mm-hmm. So
yeah, let's jump through there. We've already kind of
and to move that little point around, you would just be sort of zooming in and out and dragging it manually with your fingers. And you can sort of see underneath where it says Sue-Kleinkill Public Conservation Area, you have the lat long in there in the gray. Sometimes, at least I've noticed on Android, if it's not registering and shows up as 0,0 or something akin to that, then it means your GPS is off or something else is going on. So you'll want to do some troubleshooting there if it doesn't come up with any numbers. Yep. And so that's what that observation is going to look like once you have the date autofills and you have the location in there.
Right.
I also, if you just want to go back one slide, I don't know if we mentioned this at all. That captive or cultivated checkbox. I think a lot of people know this, but people have asked me in the past what that's there for. Captive or cultivated would mean it's just somebody planted it there. It's like obviously, has mulch on it or has been gardened, because that won't necessarily reflect the ecosystem that's there. So that's actually really, really helpful information. So it's always important to check that box if it's something that has been planted. Cool. So the way to get all of that data out of just the iNaturalist cloud and into the purposes that we need it for is to add the observation to a project. So that's under the add to projects tab. It's pretty straightforward. And in this screen, my account was already associated with the Columbia Land Conservancy. So I only have to check the box. We'll see in the iPhone version of these slides later that, Doug has all of the organizations that he's participated in projects for on there. So you would just click whichever one is appropriate for your needs. And we will be going over how to get in on those projects later. But once it's there, then you just have to click it to make sure it comes to us. Yep, so I just searched it right in the search bar. And at the end of the process, you can just see that the photo, the suspected species that I think it is, the location, and all of the other data that we put in shows up on that list. And if you did all of it in the field without a Wi-Fi connection, then there will be the option to select everything from that same list and upload it, because I personally never have a Wi-Fi connection on a hike. So that's what the observation looks like when you click on it, if you want to review and make sure everything's all set to go. So the other aspect of this, in addition to contributing to it and learning for yourself and giving us data, is the other side of the coin, where you're helping confirm the identifications that others have made, or else none of the data would ever get that research grade little green tag on there. So you can usually do it by region. You hit that explore button, which sort of has that tilted compass on there. And I just scroll through. I think it looks a little different on iPhone, which we'll go over, until I see something that I am very confident in my recognition of. So for this example, I chose sumacs. Head over there. So I clicked on that sumac identification because I said, okay, I'm 100% sure that's what it is. And then you can interact with that post. So you can press that green check mark to say agree, like Doug did with that porcupine activity, to give somebody like, yep, give somebody the confirmation on that data. Or you have the option to suggest something else. Say, actually, that's not sumac. That looks like the lookalike, tree of heaven, or comment and ask them for more information, or say like, this picture is too blurry to tell. So that's where that user interaction takes place and becomes very helpful. So I just went ahead and typed it right in there because I knew what it was. So if you were to go and say, oh no, it's actually this, or you're right that it's in this family, but I could tell you it's in this species, then you can type it right in there. So I put the name in, and Staghorn sumac came right up. And then I can again do that side-by-side comparison if I want to with the arrows that point both directions. I didn't know what that button did for a long time, and I'm really excited that it has that function. And then when I want to submit it, then I hit that check mark again.
Yeah, and the iNaturalist system is resilient enough that you don't need to know the scientific names for these species. You can just work off of the common names. So JJ could have also just typed in staghorn and sumac and pulled this up. It works both ways. There are those of us who really only know species by their scientific names, and then there are others like myself that can't remember a scientific name if my life depended on it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm the opposite. It's a problem I have. I took Latin in school, so that's my only opportunity to use it. Is play. So yeah, they definitely are. They're, if you search either, you'll get results for both. And I think there are multiple common names in there as well. So the data is pretty thorough. You'll find what you're looking for. And then once it's all set to go, I just hit that add identification check mark in the corner. Check marks are always good when you are like confident and feel done. It's usually the check mark button.
Mm-hmm. All right, so I just want to give down a quick run on the iPhone. So just it's very similar to the Android. The steps are all the same. It's just the kind of iconography, the user interface is going to be just a little different, and that's just the world that we live in. I don't know why people can't make an iPhone app and an Android app look the same, but the underlying operating principle here is the same. So there's the observe button. You have the option of taking a photo right there, using no photo, or choosing one from your camera roll. My version of the app currently does not have the ability of uploading sound. I need to do that through a third-party service called SoundCloud, and that's just a bit beyond my technological capacity. There's all the observations. You hit this observe button in the lower center. Excuse me for a second. So that's how that works. Again, you have these choices to work with. Again, because I had the geotag on, I imported this photo that was taken, and it gave me some suggestions. It looked like it might have been a red-spotted admiral. I used the info to look deeper into that species and look at maybe more than one photo. I don't have the side-by-side comparison here. That I can do on the website version. Choosing to jump in and search, I knew this photo was taken at Siegel Klein Kill, so I kind of zoomed in and set that it was in this area. There are map options down here, so for those of you who really just want to look at it like it's a Google map, you can do a standard, which is just the roads and maybe the little green polygons for the conservation areas. Or if you want to do it by satellite because you knew that you took it on a forest edge in the field, you can kind of hone in and get that observation accuracy a bit better there. So this is what the screen looks like. I've got the photo, which is the observation. I can add others if I took multiple photos of that species there. Say the flowers were in a different position than the leaf structure. Say leaves might have been on a plant opposite versus alternate, and I thought that was important for identification. I might take a couple photos so that other users will be able to dive in on better detail. I can also enter stuff in this notes field that says, saw it, and it was this red spotted admiral that I think it's red spotted admiral. Well, I saw it here in this type of environment, maybe a grassland versus a forest, which might not be able to be identified from the photo. It's already geotagged it for me because I placed it in there, and then I'd go and add it to the project and then hit the save button. Here I've turned on the project that I want it to be in. There's a few that I'm involved in. If I'm uploading photos that are from our game cameras, I might use the camera traps one so that other wildlife biologist focused people can find those. And then also was asked to join this type of salamander project. So those observations I can go in there. Again, here's how the Explore tab looks in the iPhone version. It is the same compass, pointing kind of southwest, northeast. You have the option of looking at it in the map version. So if you're interested in observations nearby, or you can look at it in a grid similar to what JJ did, and you can see the different photos. Here, I might try to focus on this round-lobed hepatica because I'm pretty sure that I agree with that observation. And that's that. I saved it. I've uploaded it when I got home. It's a cool observation. Although I'm sure a lot of you are wondering, we keep talking about this project part, the Columbia Land Conservancy project. I don't know how to find those on the phone myself. The best way to join projects and search projects is through the website. And so as you see here, you go to the community tab, go down to projects, and then you're able to search the project. Here, we've kept it simple. The project is the organization. We are the Columbia Land Conservancy. The project area is the county. And we can go and, as curators and managers of this project, go into the different conservation area places and search for observations and add those in for, folk who aren't here today and are taking observations and aren't adding the project. We can still go back and add them into the project on our own. After you search, this is what it comes up with. Because we also had a bio blitz at Sea Kleinkill and mentioned that it's Columbia Land Conservancy. That shows up in there. And you're going to have to forgive me because I'm already in the project. I can't show you how to join or add. So I've had a different project here. So here you can add an observation in the big, bright add observation things. And then right above that is the join the project. So if you hit that join the project, it will show up in your project list in your phone app to work through it. And then here we are in the Columbia Land Conservancy project. This is what it looks like after you've joined it. It shows that we have over 1,000 observations across the county on our conservation areas, and some that might not be on the conservation areas, but are in the county and still useful to us. Of those, we've had we've interacted with 85 people who have made observations on the conservation areas, and we've seen almost 500 different species. That's the part that I think is cool. There's more than 500 species, just out there that we've casually picked up or purposely gone out and sought and collected through this curation system. So we went pretty fast through that, and I want to spend a good deal of time here kind of helping you all troubleshoot some of the problems that you might be having, answer your questions, and hopefully get you encouraged and enthusiastic enough to head out there today while it's supposed to be nice and start observing.
Maybe we should check in with Deborah Mintz and see. Deborah, did you get it figured out?
It never did this before. I don't know what's happening really, but all I can see are my observations. And when I try to get out of that screen, I have a map of my local area. I tried turning off location services. I tried logging out and logging back in, and nothing worked. So I don't know what's going on, but it's usually fine. So I'm just going to listen, and I'll try to figure it out later.
Mm-hmm.
So you've used it before though?
Yeah, I have like 50 observations, which is why I don't want to delete the app because I'd lose them, but I don't know what else to do, really.
As long as those observations pop up and are saved by your username on the website. So even if you delete the app or your phone gets dropped in the Agawamic while you're out there at High Falls, it can still be recovered. Those observations are saved out in the cloud storage that iNaturalist uses.
Okay, good.
So could this is Mary Keegan, if I could just make a couple of observations about that might be useful in the future. I didn't know anything about iNaturalist, which I think it said 44% of your folks did not. I didn't have it downloaded, so it would have been helpful to know that I should download it beforehand.
Mhm.
And since over 2/3 of the individuals were using an iPhone, it would have been better to start with the iPhone and then go to the Android, because obviously most people had iPhones that were on this particular webinar. So just a couple of points. So I did go on and upload it while you were talking. So I missed a lot. I missed a lot because I was trying to catch up with you. And so just FYI, I also figured out, how to get into Columbia Land Conservancy as a project, so hopefully, I'll be able to use it, but just a couple of thoughts about doing it in the future.
Thank you, Mary. I appreciate that feedback. And I want to let everybody know too, that we will be following up this webinar. It's being recorded. So it'll be up on CLC's YouTube site early next week, and we'll send out a link in an email. And we're also going to send out a couple other videos that Heidi and Jen have been putting together that are kind of a walkthrough of making observations on the various platforms in the field. And hopefully those will be just as useful to all of you as you try to revisit and dig into using the app to observe out there on the conservation areas.
Yeah, I think
oh,
I'm sorry.
Sorry, I had a question about when I do an observation and I share it, and then it gives me all the possibilities, and I notice sometimes I can immediately eliminate things because I know they're not in my area, they're southern or something like that. Does the app learn more about, I mean, when you put on location services, does it learn like what's in your area eventually, or is that they only find that out by people sharing? You get kind of a critical mass of the same people seeing the same thing, as you were mentioning before. How does that work to be more precise about whether what you found is in your area?
Yeah, so it's a pretty neat piece of technology. So it does it's kind of the service is constantly learning. So the more observations that we make and that are confirmed by other users in our area adds to a data set. So when you make an observation of it might be silky dogwood or some other species even in your backyard, because a lot of other users in this geographic area have observed that and have taken pictures of it, the machine can better identify it. And so the more data that's collected and the more photos that are verified over time, the better the system will get at identifying the species.
Okay, thank you.
And I think partially that's why it took several years of iNaturalist kind of existing and people having a guidebook on one side and looking at their photo and then trying to enter the information for others to confirm before we are able to get to this point where the app itself is able to do it. I also want to suggest another app that iNaturalist has put out called Seek. And it's more of just, it's less of the data collection and more of just going out there and helping you identify the plants in your area. It's taking all of that data that's been collected and just making it a fun, interactive way that doesn't necessarily add to the scientific data set, but is a great and engaging way for you to get to know the natural world around you. It's a little bit more user friendly too.
Yeah, Seek is I know it's sort of like I don't know, a way to like almost gamify learning species, and I've sort of recommended it to younger people as well that like are just starting out, or to people that are sort of new to using their devices in the field for things like that, because it's just very like cut and dry, and it's kind of fun and gratifying to like fulfill, yes, I saw all these species. And to just reiterate something that Doug mentioned, to Mary's point, that I think when we go over things like this live, it definitely has some limitations. So what's going to be super crucial is keeping an eye out for the follow-up email that we're going to send out, where we were able to go over a lot of those steps in the field, which is I think has some benefits to it, better than just seeing the slides. You can actually see how you would do it if you were on a hike at one of our conservation areas or something like that.
Yeah. Deborah, I want to show you and everyone else something, kind of going back to your question about the usefulness of your photos and how that works with the machine learning. So I'm just going to quickly jump over here back to my screen. So this is an observation that I made on one of CLC's properties. And let me just zoom that out. So I've clicked on the compare button that's there. And so this map that they make available, oh, it's not going to show it very well. So you can see all these little red squares. Those are several mile square blocks, but all of those are places that witch hazel has been observed. And the darker the color means there's more and more observations of that in that selected area. It also suggests that maybe it's not witch hazel, maybe it's this Ozark witch hazel, which I disagree with, but Ozark witch hazel has had confirmed observations kind of in the greater Northeast area, and particularly around New York City, where it might have been brought in as an ornamental. So this is just kind of what it looks like on the web, and you can go in and search for different species. JJ, why don't you throw out a species name right now?
How about sugar maple?
Great. So sugar maple typed it in there. I can view observations. I can learn more about the taxa. It shows me other observations of sugar maple from all of 9 minutes ago. And I can look at the map and see where sugar maple is, and also the density of those observations. Unsurprisingly, it follows kind of the Appalachian Ridge and is very prominent in northern New England and in Canada. So that's just kind of there's some exploration and learning opportunities out here, and also you can start to see patterns of specific species if you are so inclined.
I'm trying to raise my hand. Was the first picture that was under sugar maple looked a lot like an oak to me.
Let's go back. All right. Sorry, I did that the wrong way.
Spirit. That's the spirit.
I'm not in the screen share. Yeah, so we can go here. And you know what? You are absolutely right. This one from 6 days ago, I don't think that's a sugar maple.
No.
Wrong.
Certainly not.
Disagree with him, Doug.
Well, I can only disagree by suggesting a different species. And I am not quite sure what that might be. Given that it's in Tennessee, that's a bit outside my comfort zone and knowledge of tree species down there. But one of the things I can do is say this does not look like a sugar maple. A sugar maple, and then I can say, yeah, done. All right, there we go. That person now knows that someone thinks that they're wrong. That's okay. That's okay. I get all sorts of comments on my observations of people disagreeing. because there is a social aspect to it. There's this little area up here that says if there's an update, whether it's someone agrees with an observation or what they see.
So I do want to make the point that iNaturalist is definitely something that can be as simple or as complex as you want it to be. So like I said, when I first started using it, I was doing like manual labor in the field, and I didn't have the opportunity to get too into it, but it was still really helpful to me because I just real quick like popped a picture, put an observation up, and it wasn't until I'd already been using the app for probably a few months and got familiar with it. It wasn't until then that I got into the explore options and the extent of projects and things like that. So if some of this seems like a lot, don't feel too pressured to like jump in. As I don't know if you saw on our collective screenshots, my account had probably 25 observations, and Doug has, I think, closer to like 2,000. So there's definitely a gradient of how involved you can get, and there's a lot to explore the more that you learn and the more that you want to get into a certain area and a certain project. So it's just getting started is the tough part.
Yes, Joanne.
Are there some kinds of observations that are more helpful to you than others? That's part one. And part two, how do you deal with something, we've been in the field and put up a picture and something like that non-sugar maple gets identified as a sugar maple. It's wildly wrong. And so I think what kinds of observations are more helpful to you than others? And then how do you deal with obviously misidentified things?
I'm going to go in the reverse order here. How do we deal with misidentifications? I think that's it's when we kind of go through and look at the observations that are in the project, as other observers and other naturalists, we can disagree with that observation, and whether that's suggesting a different one or just making a comment or trying to take it back, say like, well, one of the things I could have done with that tree ID is say, instead of just saying, I don't think this is a sugar maple and be all kind of snarky on the internet, I could have suggested that, at least is probably in the family of deciduous trees or deciduous. that might have been more useful. It would have taken it a step down. And one of the things you can do is you can kind of search and create search parameters. So you're only you could only look at things that need ID or that there is disagreement about, and you can intersect and provide that. It's the network of naturalists that come in and agree or disagree, and that's why I had that screen share of the long-tailed weasel versus short-tailed weasel. I thought it was, I haven't really encountered long-tailed weasels. The tail didn't seem too long and what I was reading about it. But then I had two other naturalists whom I don't know come in and disagree and provide some reasoning as to why they disagreed, being that belly color. So there, you can get into more details. JJ said, it's really what you want to put into it. Now to your first question about what sort of observations are best for us, all of them. Plants, whether they're native or non-native, I find it particularly helpful, and I use the app a lot as I'm seeing plant species move through their different phenological stages, whether it's the first buds of a leaf or the first flowers of a year, like those spring ephemerals that pop up. In terms of flowering plants, the flowers are very helpful in identifying them. But it's also kind of we could pull all of those flowers out and over time look at the different dates of flowering too. Animal species are always useful because mammals tend to be pretty ephemeral and move across the landscape quickly, so we don't always have them on any given site at any given time. So knowing that there are weasels or bobcat or black bear or different bird species like the sage thrasher at Ooms, that's very useful to us. just the greater density of observations and confirmed observations is going to give us the best scientific data set in the long run that we can use to further our management and knowledge of these lands.
One thing too that I've heard a lot of people say when they get started using iNaturalist is they shy away from putting up observations that are like, I guess, like seem boring. You know, like if there's a plant like that's flowering and there's also just like a sedge, they're both, to get both of those is important. It's not like, oh, you know, that's just a pine, like you see those everywhere, because the information that we're really going to glean from all the iNaturalist data is sometimes based on like the individual data point, but it's also like, you know, if we see an observation of a white pine next to an observation of a mountain laurel next to partridge berry or something, then we can say, okay, these are all things that you know, would require acidic soils or something like that. So that's where we get our data from. So if you know, you feel like you're probably like the millionth person to map out where you saw Phragmites or cattails or a Carex species, then still do it anyway, for sure. It doesn't have to be.
And I would also caution, you know, the iNaturalist is also reflective of the different kind of biological disciplines. So you might get a photo of an interesting spider, but there might not be that many people that have a level of expertise and comfort in arachnid identification that you might not get a confirmation or get that research grade very quickly. Grasses and sedges are particularly difficult to identify, or even species like violets and asters. So don't be dissuaded if you're not getting confirmations to your observations. Those observations are still just as valid, and in a matter of time, it's likely that someone will get in there and look at what you saw and either provide a confirmation or suggest an alternative. And when they suggest an alternative, you get a prompt and you can look at it. You can look at that comparison and learn more about what and why they suggested that, and you can agree or disagree.
I would add too that the more photos that go into iNaturalist, the better the system is at identifying things. So I feel like it's kind of that positive feedback loop that every time you take a picture of an aster and you confirm and you get the research grade confirmation, then that just helps sort of the next person identifying it, like who is using it. And also to Doug's point about the, mammals and birds and things that you might not get a good picture with your cell phone. Like if you have a good camera, as Doug was showing doing it on the web platform, like that's an opportunity to upload those photos. And so, any photos you take out at our sites, either on your phone or with a camera, it's all useful data for us.
Yep. Thank you, Heidi. So we've crossed the 11 o'clock threshold. I know we've kind of zoomed through this fast and it's a lot to digest. So I encourage you to keep an eye out for the follow-up email to revisit this. If you have any specific questions about it, do reach out to any of us up here at CLC, and we're happy to answer it. And one of the other things that's being worked on is another one of our colleagues is trying to create just a little like one-page pamphlet or brochure based on Android or iOS that you could bring with you in the field as you're using this. I really hope that we'll be able to all get together sometime next year to do a bio blitz at one of the properties. Bio blitzes are some of the most fun you can have with a group in iNaturalist out there. And that's a great way for us to also troubleshoot things in the field with you. We're about to enter wintertime where observations do change. But I look forward to seeing all of your observations while we're out there and connecting with you out on the PCAs in the coming months.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And if this was a lot, then don't worry, because there will be further explanations
Mhm.
in the follow-up. So don't fret. Thanks, everybody.